Metal Mule. Engineered to be different.
My name's Mark Holmes, and I set out to become the first man in the world to ride the world's largest production engine motorcycle around the world, the Triumph Rocket X with a 2.3 litre engine. Like so many, I rode bikes when I was a teenager. I'm lucky to be alive. I'm happy to still be here, learnt lessons, got married, had children, swapped the bikes for cars, and later on my wife and I decided to ride bikes again. We were stuck in a traffic jam in France and the bikes went past us, so we thought we've got to get on and do that. And so 20 years ago we started adventure riding. So in November 2016 the company that my wife and I ran for 28 years went into administration, and 11 days after that she died. She'd been fighting cancer for 8 years. We knew she was going to die. We didn't expect the company to die. So I realised I had no wife. I'd lost the mother of my 2 sons, I'd lost my business partner, I lost my best friend, I lost my company, I lost my salary, I lost my pension. So I thought, bleep, 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 I'd better go and live a dream and create a new life for myself. It was in the garage, and I loved it. Well, it was our second Triumph rocket, and I knew that the rocket attracts attention wherever it goes. It's so enormous, it's so ridiculous, but just people buzz around it. And I thought, well, I can turn that into an advantage. The people who come and talk to me, I can share my passions, I can pass on some messages to the world, I can start conversations, and who knows where it might lead. It was important to me to ride, make myself available, even vulnerable to all these people, and learn something about them and their lives, and somehow communicate my better understanding of the people of the world when I got back. No, I accept that I'm very lucky. Having run a business for so long with my wife, you've got to be positive. There are hurdles to overcome almost daily, and you've got to get over them. No one's going to do it for you. I had 8 years, well, the last 6 years of my wife's life was she spent as a terminal patient. In fact, we thought the 6 years was going to be 6 weeks when we first learned, 6 months at best. So I had lots of time to get used to the fact that she wasn't going to be around. And although, of course, desperately sad when she died, it didn't kill me. It wasn't a shock. And I know that many people do arrive at that point in life, are shocked, desperate, don't know what to do. And though I never actually thought about riding around the world, I did think about the fact that she wasn't going to be sharing my life. So I stayed positive. Okay, so the day I started, I almost stopped. I was riding down the M4, heading towards the ferry to go over to Ireland. I'd been crying a lot in that period anyway, but I wasn't crying for Sue. I suddenly realised that the love and support I'd had from my family, I just left behind. And they were also focusing their grief through me, and I'd stopped them from doing that. And I thought, what an idiot you are. Crying whilst riding's not advisable. But I stopped, and the very next day, quite by chance, actually life picked up again. I was waiting for that ferry, and a car pulled up beside me, and a lady had I'm a granny in her window. And as I was a grandfather in waiting at that point in my life, I started talking to her. And I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And within that half an hour, we'd talked about family, friends, children, grandchildren, and football as well. And we became friends. And I thought, great, that was easy. I enjoyed that. And a week later, leaving Ireland, the very same thing happened. Well, this time a dog jumped out of the van and followed by its owner, and we started chatting and we spent the day together. And that was lovely. And I thought, oh, there's a real positivity to riding alone. I'd never actually done it till that point, always with my wife or with some mates. I thought, I can engage with the world. I can fall in love with people, not in the actual sense, but just have great conversations one after the other. If I continue to make myself open and to them, I can profit from them, as well as hopefully they might learn something positive from me and the messages I had and the engagements we had together. It was a two-way thing, but I immediately realised it was possible. I like warm weather, so I basically, leaving in April, I spent a couple of months in Europe. where it was warming up. My love of football enabled me to visit stadiums at Madrid and Barcelona and Milan, and that was great. And then eventually headed east through Turkey, Iran, most hospitable people in the world in Iran. I love them. Then on to India, the most fascinating country I visited. The culture is so utterly different, and I fought against it initially, but then accepted it and loved it. On to Indonesia, where my eldest son lives, and he's married to an Indonesian, and by the time I got there I had become the grandfather of a beautiful girl. And we spent some lovely time together. So basically heading towards Indonesia via Iran and India, which fascinated me. So that was that route. Hopped over to Australia, and actually whilst my bike was en route, I went to New Zealand and hired a bike for a couple of weeks. Then across the Pacific to Chile, Argentina, and most but not every single country in South America, before then heading north, and that's another story. Well, I visited the United States at least 30 times in my life and done a lot of business there, so I just applied online for my visa waiver application through their ESTA system and was taken aback when it said, "Not authorised for travel." Why? It turns out, and it's still not confirmed, it's probably because I visited Iran, and at the time some legislation had just been passed banning Iranian nationals, amongst others, from entering the United States. I'm not an Iranian national, but I think the United States consulate in Lima just didn't know how to handle me. So they pushed me on to the State Department in Washington, who asked more questions, and I spent 50 days staring at a really interesting ceiling in a hotel bedroom in Lima, waiting for them to respond, trying all sorts of things to try and get that visa. I made a full visa application, trying to get that visa application passed. I left without it. So I then had to abandon visiting the United States on this trip, visiting so many family and friends, abandoning the idea of a great New York finish, and I flew over the United States to Canada instead. Quite disappointed. Which took me quite by surprise. So 5 weeks into the journey, I ended up in Cassis, a lovely little port near Marseille in south of France, where Sue and I often used to go to. It was a great bolt hole for us. But I decided to stay there and actually really enjoyed it. All very familiar to me, even though she wasn't with me. I quite enjoyed it. On the second night, I booked myself into a restaurant we'd not been to, sat down, and 3 people had arrived at a table directly opposite me, and they beckoned me to join them. Well, as they were speaking French 10 to the dozen, and I was not a great French speaker, I declined until I got to the second bottle of wine, stepped over and said, "Bonsoir, je m'appelle Marc et je suis anglais." Well, they were surprised as well. But they introduced themselves to me. So the gentleman's name was Jean-Philippe. The lady in the middle with the light brown hair said her name was Dalila. I said, "Pardon?" She said, "Dalila." Well, I'd never met a Dalila in my life. And she introduced me to the blonde-haired lady beside her, whose name was also Dalila. 2 arrived at once. But we had a great evening, and to cut a long story short, we all got very drunk, went back to the house they'd been renting on holiday, fell asleep on the sofa, and I woke in the morning and was talking to the brown-haired Dalila, overlooking a lovely little bay, and she was describing the scene and what had been happening there over the years, and I looked into her eyes, and boom, something happened at that moment. Something quite extraordinary and unexpected, and I'm still not sure what. She felt the same, that we didn't talk about it immediately. But we exchanged details, and WhatsApp conversations started, and thank goodness for Google Translate, because that helped as well. I then went to see her in Lyon. We had a lovely evening together, and the following day I said, "Well, I'm still going to go around the world. Bye-bye." And she said, "Yeah, of course, you've got to go." And about 10 days later, I was travelling up Italy and invited her to join me somewhere, and she chose Rome, so we spent 4 nights together there, and that was lovely. Really lovely, very romantic city. And then at the airport, we said goodbye again. "I'm still going around the world." Yeah, you've got to go around the world. And 2 months later, she came out to Istanbul, and we spent 10 days together there. And by now, we'd fallen in love. Which took me by surprise. It was very nice. But we still say goodbye at the airport with the usual phrase, "Bye-bye, I'm still going around the world." Yeah, you've got to. We'd now talked about me and my new life with her in Lyon, becoming a Frenchman, buying a baguette every morning, learning the culture, living my new life with her. And that begs a question, kind of old-fashioned. If you're going to commit, then commit. So by the time we next met, which was in southern Spain, I flew back there from Delhi, I thought, Mark, keep control of yourself. Don't ask the M word. But the ever so clever Dalila, it turns out, has been having the same thoughts. And even before we'd left the airport terminal together, she said, Mark, is there a question you're planning to ask me? I said, oh, no. Oh, yes, there is. So the following night, just 12 days together we'd spent, I asked her to marry me at the end of the trip. Of course, she said yes. Then we met up on Bali. Well, who wouldn't accept an invitation to come to Bali? And we had a lovely time there. And then I flew back to Lyon that Christmas. I have to admit, Lyon's pretty close to where my family were in London, but they weren't too happy with me, and I decided to postpone rebuilding my relationship with them for another day. But Lyon, I was very welcome. Then we were separated for 4 months, and cut a long story short, then we met up in Mexico, where she arrived at the airport with another truly spectacular question. Mark, do you know it's really easy to get married in Mexico? Ike and Tina Turner did it in 1962, she said, and people have been doing it ever since. So that's what we did. On the 30th of April 2018, we got married. A nice enough little service in a registry office, followed by champagne back at our hotel, followed an hour later by a taxi ride back to the airport, and 4 hours later we separated. And then I finished my journey in London, but immediately went straight on to Lyon, where I started my life, reborn. Well, oddly enough, I left the United Kingdom thinking I might be the only widower in the world, and soon realised that was far from the case. And I met so many people who had lost their spouses. We had brief conversations, and they would often end up with wet eyes. And a couple of those conversations end up in them changing my life, and I think I changed that. Well, I know I changed them. One lady in New Zealand stopped what she was doing, and then 2 hours later wrote to me and said, you've changed my life. I am going to learn how to ride that bike, something I've been promising to do all my life, and I'm going to go on adventures. And 2 months later she showed me her test certificate, and then 2 months after that she showed me her and her son with their bikes riding around South Island, New Zealand. So I learnt that grief has no timeline. Some people take years, probably the rest of their lives, to get over it and not do so. And it's difficult. I fully recognise that leaving the United Kingdom on my bike was a tremendous accelerant, in every way an accelerant to my grieving process. I thought about Sue often. I could think about her when I wanted to, but I was living a very busy life, getting around the world and making the most of it. So that helped me. My immediate family didn't like that. My friends, oddly enough, even those who were Sue's friends before they were my friends, loved what I was doing and thought it was very positive and congratulated me. My close family, no, they struggled, and they said it was too soon. And I fully agree with them. It certainly was too soon. But it had happened. So I dealt with them as best I could while still travelling. I focused on repairing a relationship with my ageing mother, which I've done so now, and my sons. The one who lives in Indonesia I haven't seen since, because I haven't been back to Indonesia and he hasn't been here. The one who lives in London, yeah, things are great with them now, and he loves Dalila. My brother and my sister was a little more difficult, but they're coming round, my sister especially. The real difficulty is with Sue's sister and her family, with whom I don't have... They've not cut me off, and I'm still trying to keep things going and still trying to repair things, but there's little sign of progress. And I'm not complaining, I hurt them. I did hurt them. Didn't intend to. So they recognise that. It just happened. But it's still not repaired. It's difficult. I did learn one thing, thanks to a friend, and one of my many new friends, who was in exactly the same position, and he pointed out to me, in its simplest terms, that when men lose their wives after a long and happy marriage, they feel their life is broken. And men tend to want to mend their lives by mending the broken bit. In other words, get married again. So I believe there are more widowers who have remarried quickly than there are widows who have remarried quickly. Proud, yes. Jealous, yes. Probably not happy with me initially. Very happy for me now. I'm sure of that. I have. Can I show it to you?
You can show it.
Okay. Rebirth. About my rebirth. It was reborn. I didn't anticipate this, but everything that happened to me went because I opened myself up, more so than I'd ever done in my life. Opened myself up to the world, wanted to engage with it, looking for something. If you'd asked me beforehand, I would say, well, maybe I'll live in a different country, and maybe I'll start a different kind of business, or even work for somebody. I was never very good at working for somebody, but I thought maybe I should change and try that again. I did not expect to meet someone and fall in love. I did not. If you told me I'd come back a married man, I would have dismissed that instantly. You know, after 39 years with one woman, it was just not possible. But I'm reborn, a different man, and it's because I set out with an open heart. I published it through Amazon, so any Amazon site around the world, you can click on it, and they do a print-on-demand service in half a dozen places around the world. Some places are more expensive than others, but it's as low cost as I can make it. So you click on it and it gets delivered. I'd like to say thank you to you, and also like to say thanks to Sam Manicom and Ted Simon and Lois Price and Jackie Furno and Elspeth Beard and all those others who have written fantastic books about their journey, which have inspired me. And, you know, the dream was sparked by all of them. Thank you.
Excellent finish. No worries. Excellent. That was absolutely superb.
Metal Mule. Engineered to be different.